So we have Aswin with us, guys. Aswin is a Wharton grad, Wharton Ivy League, and he went to IIT, and he went to American Express. He worked in Goldman Sachs. Now he's in Wharton as well. He's a pro coder guy, because we know. What Aswin, do you want to give
As
an
I
intro
walk
of
through
yourself?
the valley of the
So,
shadow of death, I take a look at my life and
Yeah.
realize there's nothing left.
So
Cause
hello guys,
I've
I'm
been
Aswin.
blasting and laughing so long that even my mama thinks that my mind is gone. But I ain't never crossed a man that didn't deserve it. Me be treated like a punk, you know that's unheard of. You better watch how you're talking and where you're walking.
I'm from
Or
Kerala.
you and
If
your
you've heard of this place called Erinjalakuda. Yeah, I graduated from IIT Madras back in 2017 as a chemical engineer. Wanted to do chemical engineering, but couldn't find a job there. So I went for the next best thing, which was analytics. So that's what I did for the past 5 years. First with EXL as a data science consultant, and then with American Express as a product analyst, and then with Goldman Sachs in their consumer fintech division as a retention analytics associate. So I've come to Wharton, just started at Wharton 6 months ago, and I'll be heading to Dubai for my internship as a management consultant. And yeah, thank you for bringing me on the call, Hari.
yeah, man, definitely. So I think like we all have a lot of questions. So we'll start from your journey at IIT. Like, how was your journey at IIT, and how did you go from being a chemical engineer to an analytics person? Like, how did the transition happen? Did you do some courses? Did you take
Well,
some classes?
all right. So back in college, I was actually very into chemical engineering. I was actually hoping that I would join a major chemical engineering company, but the problem was that we had a down year back when I was recruiting, so we did not have a lot of companies coming in. So I had to actually pivot. And one thing that I was doing on the side, along with my chemical engineering stuff, was analytics. So I had done a lot of research projects with professors where I had to use data in order to solve a lot of chemical engineering problems. So that kind of piqued my interest in analytics. And I also noticed that analytics was something that came very naturally to me. So I thought I had a sense that I would be able to do well if I were to enter analytics. And that's how it happened. That's how I got into analytics.
Oh, damn, nice. So I think like you worked in a bunch of companies from EXL to American Express. Can you just talk about your corporate experience? Like of course we know that you didn't really enjoy corporate as much because that's why you did an MBA. But then like, how was your experience in corporates in general, especially Amex and Gold? We'll start from Amex.
No, I actually enjoyed my time there. Coming to Wharton is just me being very ambitious,
Oh.
unnecessarily ambitious, maybe. Yeah, but
So
I would have
so-
been very happy staying
yeah.
on.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, American Express, what's the corporate life like? Of course, it's very different to a student life, I'm going to tell you. The stakes are higher. People expect you to know your stuff inside out. So yeah, you are much more accountable. You will be eventually seen as an expert, and people will rely on you for making decisions worth millions of dollars. So yeah, you'll need to get comfortable with that fact very soon when you enter corporate. And what else is different about corporate life? Yeah, it's not going to be one thing I'm going to tell you is the undergrad life. You won't get that life back. I mean, people around you, being around so many friends where you chill,
Yeah.
have casual conversations. That's something you will miss when you enter a corporate, because people tend to be very professional, and you might not be able to make the same kind of connections that that you must have in your undergrad. So that's something you need to be aware of. Other than that, what else? I think that's about it, dude. I think a couple of things that stick out to me when I compare corporate life to student life.
Yeah. But then like I work in analytics as well. I mean, I told you I worked in analytics, especially I was working in unsupervised learning and we working with data a lot when I doing my 6 month internship. So like, can you talk about your analytics experience? Like, how did you grow as an analyst? And I was thinking like, okay, I'll also be a data analyst, but then I switched to software development. Maybe if you had to give advice to some data analyst who's just getting started, what would be done? How do you go about it?
Yeah. So I'll tell you about my journey and all the learnings I've made, and hopefully people can draw learnings from that as well for themselves. So my first role at EXL was that of a data science consultant, and it was a lot of core data science in that I had to use a lot of sophisticated computer vision techniques, natural language processing techniques, and create tools that would help my client automate some of their processes. So it was very fancy work. Loved that. But I moved to Amex because I wanted a more business-facing role, which Amex offered at that time. So yeah, my role at Amex was very different from my role at EXL in that I was more of a developer at EXL, and at Amex I was more of a frontline business employee, where data was just a means to make decisions. So my role at American Express was I had lots of data to work with, transactions data, customer data. I had to analyze that to understand how customers use their cards, where they use their cards, and using all of that data and insights that I uncover, I would have to come up with recommendations around how American Express can improve their credit card offerings or B2B payment products. So an example recommendation would be that American Express should maybe revamp the benefits they are offering on their American Express Gold card portfolio. So all these insights would be made after a lot of analysis around how customers are using their cards. And Amex being a very data-driven company, maybe one of the most data-driven companies I've seen, you can expect to do a lot of work. You can expect that a lot of the decisions they make has been made out of a lot of rigorous data analysis.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was my role at American Express. How have I grown at American Express? So my biggest learning at American Express was to see data from a business lens. So I've learned that business is what comes first,
Hmm.
and I've also learned that analytics is not all about sophisticated algorithms.
Hmm.
It's about finding the solution to a business problem.
Hmm.
So if the solution to the business problem comes out of a simple Excel pivot, that's what you go with, and that's what you should always do. Do not sophisticate it too much. But if things require you to use sophisticated analytical techniques like machine learning, then that's when you resort to it. But your first option should always be a simple Excel analysis. That's one of my biggest learnings from American Express. And then moving on to Goldman Sachs. At Goldman Sachs, it was more of although I wasn't managing people, I had to do a lot of project management and leadership there.
Yeah.
And I had to index a little lower on the analytics side of my skill set. So a lot of my work at Goldman Sachs, especially the fintech that they had, it was very new. So a lot of my work at Goldman Sachs had to do with setting up new products or processes. And in order to do that, I had to project manage a lot of people. So for example, there was this one time I had to set up a new channel, a new direct mail channel at Goldman Sachs. And in order to be able to do that, I had to coordinate and manage a lot of teams, such as marketing operations, product engineering, credit risk. So at Goldman Sachs, that's where I really learned how to manage very sophisticated projects under tight deadlines.
Yeah.
And I learned the tricks to keep people accountable, how to communicate, how to thrive in that collaborative culture, and that really, I think, helped me grow as an employee. And yeah, so to summarize, over the past 5 years, I've picked up skills in data analysis, I've picked up skills in analyzing businesses, problem solving in businesses, and also a little bit of leadership skills in managing collaborative, sophisticated project management initiatives, which I think has helped me a lot, will help me a lot going forward.
Yep. Got it. So I think where does Wharton come in the picture? So when did you think that, okay, I'll have to go to do an MBA and then go to the US and get into an Ivy League college? So when did you actually think about, should I do an MBA, should I not? Because it's a costly thing to start with, and then you have to you need to move away from family and all that. So what was your thought process like? How do you go about it?
Yeah, so I think there are two questions within your question. One is why MBA, and then why US for MBA.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the first one, why MBA. So the genesis of my need for an MBA, that actually came out of a desire to move into management consulting. Now, how did I become interested in management consulting? That's a very simple answer. One of my bosses at American Express used to be a BCG consultant, and I could see how her work was very polished and refined compared to some of her peers. And that really showed me the benefits of working in that management consulting setting, because it really showed me how you grow as a person and how refined you become as an employee. And that's how I started thinking about moving into management consulting. So my next step was to assess how I can get there. So I understood that back then, management consulting used to be a very closed thing where only MBA graduates or extremely good undergrads were recruited. Lateral opportunities were very few. It was very hard to come by. So my easiest option for me then was to go get an MBA degree, which would provide me the skill set, first of all, to succeed in management consulting, and secondly, also offer me that recruitment pipeline, easier access to that recruitment pipeline. So these were the two reasons why I chose to pursue an MBA. And why did I choose to come to the US? So there are many reasons for why I felt US was a better option compared to India. India, I think, has great institutions, IIMs and ISB. I think the caliber of students there, it would be as good as, or maybe even better than what we have at Wharton. The problem was that it was more of an MIM degree, what Indian B schools offered. Most of them were freshers. So the opportunities that you get coming out of the IIMs were also those aimed at freshers.
Okay.
Whereas in Wharton, you get recruited at a level above what you get recruited at in IIMs. Yeah. So that was one big selling point for me, in that the opportunities that you have would be those geared towards experienced professionals. And the second big benefit that you hear a lot of people telling you about a US MBA would be that there are a lot more experienced people. So there's a lot of peer learning that happens. And it's not exclusively learning from lectures and from professors. Yeah. That, I think, is a big plus point as you think about evaluating MBAs, because curriculums often tend to be outdated, and you actually would find a lot of value in learning from your peers, because that would be a lot more that would be a lot more modern and updated. Yeah. So that's another big thing. And the third big plus point is that there's an international cohort, right, when you're joining these US or international B schools. Yeah. So that experience is very different. You get to learn a lot from different cultures, and you have a lot of fun in the process, trying to socialize with international teammates, learning about how they operate.
Yeah.
So that kind of broadens your horizons and sets you up better for an international for management in an international setting such as Goldman Sachs or American Express, where you're expected to work with a lot of international colleagues.
Okay.
So I think if I were to go back into American Express, having done this Wharton stint, I would be able to better gel with some of my teammates that I have in New York.
Got it.
So these are something that you should keep in mind.
Yep. Got it. So, like, let's say a person who's just finishing undergrad. So, can he apply to Wharton? Like, what is the criteria to like get into a college like Wharton, especially in US MBAs? Because I know a friend of mine who finishes undergrad and he applied to Yale and he got an admit. And then there's you who has like 4 5 years of experience and then you apply. So, if a person who wants to do an MBA, so when should he apply? And what is the procedure like?
Yeah. All right. So I'll start with this advanced early access program that is targeted at undergrads. So a lot of USB schools, and I'm not sure about INSEAD and other international B schools, they have this early access program which is targeted, which is geared towards undergrads, high performing undergrads. So if you have exceptional internships, if you have great recommendations, great CGPA, you should consider applying to these early access programs if you know for sure that that's an MBA is what you want to do in the future. So for this, the deadlines would be around the last year of your undergrad, last semester, be more specific. So if you're thinking about this, you should look out for deadlines right now. And if you were to get admitted during these early access programs, you would be allowed to join the program after gaining 2-3 years of experience.
All right. Okay.
So I think this is becoming a very popular option in India. It wasn't very popular back then, back in 2017, but now it's gaining a lot of traction among the young crowd. So that is something you should be considering if you know for sure that you want to do an MBA. But if you're unsure, which I wasn't back in 2017, I wasn't even considering an MBA, to be honest. I was actually thinking of getting an MS.
Okay.
So if you're one of those people, then I would say just get a job that you're really passionate about, that you enjoy, and get some of that work experience in. And if it's a job that you really enjoy, you'll naturally perform very well and build a good profile for yourself. And if it so happens that you find a need for an MBA in the process, also make sure that you have some extracurriculars on the side to show that you're not very one-dimensional. So the extracurricular I had was to volunteer for a non-profit called Statistics Without Borders, where I was able to help design COVID-19 dashboards, and that I was able to demonstrate that I wasn't just a corporate workhorse. I was able to show that I also had interests outside of this, outside of my corporate life, and I also had interests in music. So I also wrote about that. So my final Wharton essay spoke about my work experience, and also my interests in using data for the greater good, and also my interests in music. So showing yourself as this well-rounded candidate works in your favor when you're applying to colleges.
Got it.
And yeah, to answer your question about when to think about an MBA, I would say 3 years would be the right spot for you to get into an MBA, or rather a very early stage to get into an MBA. And the average age of my cohort here is about 5 years of work ex. So once you hit about 3 years, that's when you should start thinking about whether an MBA would add value given your future aspirations. And then what else was there? Did I miss something?
No, you got it. Yeah. And sure. So can you tell us about your experience in education in India and education abroad? You've been like in the elite institutions in India and the elite institution abroad as well. So like, what is the difference between both of them? What is the mindset of students? How do you work your way around like the extremely fiercely competitive crowd, and how do you set yourself apart of it?
Let's see. All right. I'll speak about the Indian education system first in IITs. I think the student body that I work with, they are extremely talented. My peers were all like super genius, super smart. And the professors were also like really smart, I would say. They really knew their shit. They went really deep into the subjects that they were experts in. And if you would go to them with any doubts, you can be sure to get your doubts cleared. And as far as pedagogy is concerned, the way they teach their classes, that was also really good. And since my classes were mostly theoretical, I think the way my professors taught me worked well. They would go deep into every single concept that they wanted us to know. And it was very rigorous, I would say, the education that I had here at IIT. But the problem here, a few drawbacks with the Indian educational system here is that there is less focus on practical learning. And students tend to, the evaluation process itself tends to index a little high on performing a lot of math, at least in engineering. It used to index more on, the technical aspects. And that's where the US educational system differs a little. But yeah, I'd like to caveat my answer by saying that I'm doing an MBA degree here, and I was doing an engineering degree in India. So I don't know how the engineering education here in the US would compare against India. But to give you some general observations, there are a lot of practical learning courses here in the US. So there are a lot of simulations where you get together as teammates and try to solve real world situations, make a lot of decisions in a collaborative fashion. So in that manner, there is a focus on practical learning as well as teamwork.
Hmm.
So that's something I found to be missing in my engineering education back in India.
Got it.
And I'm not sure if it's because I'm in an MBA where people are more mature, but the profs tend to treat us as colleagues. So
Okay.
you can actually they actually encourage discussions
Okay.
in classes, and they are very appreciative of students challenging their assumptions.
Oh, okay.
So that's something I've not seen back in India. What else? What else is different in India? Yeah, if I were to compare an Indian MBA degree to a US MBA degree, again, yeah, there is my one of my best friends used to be in got a degree in IIM Bangalore, so I could compare how
Yeah.
the pedagogy works. It differs. So from what I heard, I think there's a lot more focus on getting a lot of marks, getting scoring well, and a lot of focus on theoretical aspects in IIMs compared to Wharton, where there isn't a lot of focus on getting good grades because of this grade non-disclosure thing.
Hmm.
And yeah, things tend to be a lot more collaborative and team-based. So yeah, that's my take on how US education differs from Indian education.
So, but is it competitive? Like, is it like people fight for marks, and you're like, there's this, at least in
Uh,
college, and there's this ranking system, and then there's at certain marks above the average, you get certain grades, and based on your grades, you will be allowed CGPA, and then based on your CGPA, you might be eligible for certain companies and whatnot. So, what is the system in what like? So, how do you get graded, and how does the grade depend on your job prospects?
hmm. So on average, if you have a very mixed cohort in a US engineering school, I would say it won't be very competitive. India would be a much more competitive environment any day because Indian students, they generally tend to be very quantitatively sound. So
Hmm.
they have grown up learning a lot of these quantitative methods. So there's no way you'd be able to brush them aside when it
Hmm.
comes to quantitative aspects. But in the US, I think people who have studied, who have grown up in India, they don't index so much on these quantitative aspects. So that as an Indian, if you were to be enrolled in a quantitative course alongside a diverse cohort, I think you would do pretty well.
Hmm.
But if you're in a course that indexes more on reflections, a lot of subjective reflections of what you've learned, I think that's where Indian students tend to not fare as well as some of these students who have grown up in the US.
Hmm.
But from a competitive aspect, I think, yeah, an engineering master's in the US would be just as competitive as an engineering undergrad in India, or maybe even more competitive because I've seen a lot of people score very well in US engineering settings
Hmm.
compared to Indian engineering settings because I think a lot of these students, they have a chip on their shoulder
Yeah.
coming into their masters. They have a point to prove.
Yeah.
So a lot of them would be focused on academics.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Got it. But then, like, how is the MBA system in the Wharton? Like, what do you guys learn? And like, is it just case studies, or like, how do you actually go about learning about business?
Yeah, so there are courses focused on case studies, and there are courses that teach you theoretical concepts which
Okay.
index on quantitative stuff.
Hmm.
So the case studies, that's a good way of learning. It's a very practical way of learning. So before you get into each class, you're supposed to read these real world business situations,
Hmm.
form an opinion, and go
Okay.
after you go into this class,
Hmm.
you're expected to discuss your opinions and
Hmm.
learnings from these case studies, and that's where most of the time is spent in the class.
Okay. Okay.
When it comes to these theoretical subjects, that's your usual conventional
Hmm.
lecture-based classes that you see back in India as well.
Got it.
So professors would come in, they would just speak about concepts for 90 minutes
Hmm.
non-stop. And then if you're interested in the subject, you would focus. Otherwise, I see a lot of my classmates just drifting off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, these are broadly the two types of courses that you see here at Wharton.
Hmm.
And these case study simulation-based courses are where you learn a lot of practical stuff. And yeah, that's what you should expect coming into a US MBA degree. And there's a third class of courses which I missed, which is soft skills courses,
Hmm.
which I think are great. Every MBA candidate should generally try to get some of these courses on their transcript. So I'm doing a course called negotiations right now.
Okay.
And what I do is professor hands us a situation before the class, and I'm supposed to come up with a strategy for how to negotiate with my partner going into my class. So I go into my class, employ my strategy to try to get the best outcome for myself in this negotiation session.
Yeah.
And yeah, so soft skill courses like these are where you would learn skills that would stick with you for the rest
Got
of your career.
Yeah.
And that I can't say that holds true for some of these theoretical or case study based courses. So yeah, soft skill courses are something you should definitely consider if you're getting an MBA here.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And so I think, how does the placement process and internship process in the US work? Like what do you need to prepare for it? How do companies evaluate you and judge you, especially if you're an Indian student over there? Is there any biases, or is there any favorable advantages that you have? And like, how do you go about learning and excelling in placements and interviews over there? And most importantly, do you get a good return of investment on your money that you put to get an MBA degree?
Yeah. So to answer your last question, you definitely get a good return on your
Okay.
investment.
That's fine.
Because first of all, the outcomes from the MBA degree, it's great. I think the cost of attendance of a Wharton MBA degree would be around 200 to 50K. And the average salaries that you get after you graduate, for an Indian at least, would be in the 200 to 50K ballpark.
Got it.
So if you're smart enough, you would be able to pay off your loans in 5 years.
Okay.
It really depends upon how you want to handle the loan, but the return on investment is great from a financial sense, and also from another perspective, in that this Wharton brand, it just stays with you wherever you go, right? If you tell people that you're from Wharton or from any elite USB school or any elite MBA degree, for example, even IIMs, that brand itself would take you a long way. You would be the first to be considered from a pool of candidates applying to a job, and your network itself would be very valuable because your network itself would be in very good jobs. You would be able to tap into that network to get referrals. So from that perspective, these brands go a long way. So yeah, definitely good return on investment. How does the placement process look like in the US? It's, at least for consulting, it's heavily networking based. So you're expected to network a lot with existing employees at the firms of your choice, make a good impression, and when you submit your application for these internships or jobs, large your chances of getting an interview call, it depends a lot on what impression you've been able to make during these coffee chats. If you're someone who hasn't networked a lot, or if you've networked in a bad manner, you created a wrong impression, you will not get an interview call. So that's one way in which the US consulting recruitment process differs from the Indian recruitment process. Here, you have to make a good impression. You have to network a lot. Only then can you expect a good interview call. But for tech, it's a little different. If you're recruiting for tech or other services, networking doesn't matter as much as does your resume. So resume is what matters more here. Resume and reference. You need to have a strong resume, and if a tech recruiter finds that your experiences are relevant, they would reach out to you regardless of whether you've networked with them. And that is closer to an Indian recruitment experience, I would say. So yeah, that's how it's different.
Is there like a placement drive sort of thing? You know, like where companies keep coming and then you keep applying, or is it like you have to go and apply off campus, and then how does it work? How does it work? Because in US, I heard that there's no, like, what do you say, placement process. There's no like placement drives in general. Like, is it true? Like, what is your opinion?
Yeah, I think there are placement drives. It's called career fairs. But it's not the same as an Indian placement drive. Here, a lot of the work is done before the placement drive itself in your networking and all right? And then there are some career paths like investment banking or consulting, which have these placement drive sort of things where all of these companies come on 1 or 2 days and recruit everyone they want. So that's the closest you can get to a placement drive experience. But companies like tech, that works more. The tech recruitment process is more random in that you just apply off campus, and if they have an opening, they'll reach out to you. And the timelines for that are very unpredictable. So yeah, there are 2 classes. In Wharton, we call them mature and enterprise. Mature is your placement drive kind of thing. Enterprise is your random, out of the blue interview kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So like, do you also like apply on LinkedIn and then accept as a referral? And is that how enterprise?
That's how enterprise works. Correct.
Okay. So it's like off campus. I mean, at least off campus opportunities.
Yeah, off campus, but some firms also advertise on Wharton's job board. But eventually, you have to go and apply on their website too.
Okay. Got it. Understood. Well, there's just
yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm in India and if I want to apply for a company which comes with a placement like important, so how do I maximize my chances of getting it? So how should I prepare myself from a skills point of view and from a network point of view? How do I maximize that?
Yeah, makes sense. So before I answer you, I just want to tell you that some of the jobs that are advertised here at Wharton, they actually require that you have an MBA degree. So some of them might be inaccessible, but others might be. So for example, consulting roles tend to open up for lateral hiring every now and then. So they should be open to people without an MBA as well. So how do you prepare for it? The first thing you should do would be to go back, clean up your resume, make it 1 page, very impact oriented, show bullet points that demonstrate problem solving, leadership, all of that stuff, all of the skills and traits that are important for consulting. And then once your resume is solid, prepare a pitch for yourself. A 1-minute pitch that summarizes all your experiences and also kind of shows off all your accomplishments. So that pitch is really important because we would be using that later on for your networking. So once your pitch is prepared, you go reach out to a lot of consultants over LinkedIn or through your personal network, set up 15-minute coffee chats with them. Coffee chats needn't have a coffee. It's just a tool for the informational chats. So you set up these coffee chats, have good questions prepared around what the culture at their firm is, what kind of projects they work on, what kind of mentorship opportunities they receive, all of that. And try to glean as much information as you can from these consultants. And then if you're able to make a good connection with them, reach out to them a few days later, ask them for a referral. And if they think that you're a good fit, that your experiences align with what they seek in consultants, they should be happy to refer you. And once you have that referral and the hiring managers like you, they'll reach out to you. And once you have that call, that's when you should start thinking about getting ready for the interviews. So I'm answering your question from a very consulting perspective.
Yeah.
So so if you're actually expecting interviews, you should start on your case prep beforehand itself. Find experienced case partners, people who've been through the case interview process. And before you give your interview, make sure you've gone through at least 20 mock interviews to make sure you're able to 20 mock interviews that cover different industries and different kinds of problems. That way, you should be good by the time your actual interview comes around. And what else? You should also, aside from the case interview component, you should also be prepared for behavioral interviews. So they'll ask you why consulting, why our firm, and then they'll ask you situational questions. Okay, let's say you have a teammate you did not get along with. How did you handle it? Questions like that. So of the 45 minutes that are allotted for one case interview, they'll take the first 10-15 minutes for intros and behavioral questions in general. So to provide for that as well. And then to speak about the interview format, it differs from firm to firm, but generally you would have 3 to 5 case interviews mixed with behavioral interviews, and you should have a decision within a week or so after the interviews are done. So make sure you have a very conversational interview during these case interview settings, in these case interview settings, because at least in the US, most people are able to successfully solve cases. So what differentiates you is how you're able to connect with the interviewer, and how if they are able to sense that you'd be a good colleague, someone good to hang out with in their free time. So that's what differentiates you here in the US. In India, I'm not very sure of what consulting firms look for, but I'm guessing a lot of these aspects would be common to both.
Got it. Yep. My final question: does it make sense to do an MBA in 2023? Because like there are a lot of people who say like MBAs, it helps you get a salary boost, some people say get exposure, there's alumni network, these things, and then there's people who like MBA doesn't matter, like your skills matter, and people like tech CEOs are like MBAs, they're not relevant anymore. You just directly just go and you can just have relevant work experience instead, right? So like, what is your take on that? How has Wharton boosted your personal brand and your improvement as an employee of a company? And if a person who's not into doing an MBA, like how should he upskill himself, and how does he make sure that he gets relevant opportunities as well?
All right. I think MBA is still a very useful degree, I would say. Although I would say that some of the points that people who are against MBA put out, they make sense. A lot of, at least since tech is growing so much, tech is an industry that does not really care so much about an MBA. So because of that, I think people are being misled to assume that MBA does not have value at all, because the market is flooded with tech jobs. But I would still say MBA does have a lot of value, and I think a lot of the value comes from the signaling effect. Having a good MBA brand on your resume really signals to employers that you are someone who's very capable. It just makes recruiters' job easier, right? If you have that brand, recruiters would know that they won't go very wrong if they were to recruit you, because you've accomplished enough to get into a good MBA brand. So that signaling effect stays with you for a long time. And it's not just employment. This brand just helps you at a lot of other places as well. If you're building a startup, you want to fundraise, the brand will help you. It will help that you're a Wharton grad or an IIM grad. What else? And then there are a lot of career opportunities that are open that you can get only through these MBA pipelines. For example, consulting or investment banking. If you want to make that career switch, an MBA is almost a must do, because otherwise you might not be able to make that switch. So an MBA is useful, very useful from that perspective as well. And to expand a little more on the last point that I spoke about the career switch, there are a lot of people who are unhappy with their jobs and are desperate to make that switch. Although they can do it without an MBA, they can do it by building a lot of practical skills. So for example, if someone wants to move from sales to analytics, they can spend a lot of time working on analytics projects on the side, building a portfolio on GitHub. That could potentially help them land interviews. I think a degree in analytics or let's say an MBA would make that easier, because MBA is seen as an instrument to facilitate that career switch for a lot of people. And you will have a lot of support. A lot of your peers would be making such similar switches as well. So you won't feel so alone trying to make drastic career switches. So for these 3 reasons, I think an MBA makes a lot of sense. But I do think it's very specific to the person or the kind of aspirations that you have. That's my answer.
Got it, man. Thank you so much. Any last advice for people who want to do an MBA or people who are into analytics? What would you like to tell them? Just any advice. So just stuck in something that they don't like to do. People who are aspiring to do an MBA in India or abroad.
Yeah. So one thing that I've noticed a lot of people don't do is that they don't pick career paths based on what they really like. A lot of what people pick is based on perceived value or perceived prestige associated with the career, which I would say is true to some extent in why I picked consulting as well. But I would say if you're evaluating a career option, see if it's something that you would enjoy doing, because I think you spend most of your time on your job rather than on your personal life. So it really matters that you enjoy what you do. And that's something I did well coming out of IIT. I really recognized that analytics is something that I would enjoy. And I actually did enjoy it a lot, because of which I was able to accomplish good things, create good impressions. And that really helped open up opportunities for these good MBAs for me in the future. So it matters that you enjoy what you do and pick a career that you think you would enjoy, because everything else would follow from that. Don't pick a career path just because it's prestigious. Also evaluate if you would enjoy the work that you do.
Got it.
But,
So like at Wharton, do you get a chance to like try out different things? You know, like this PVC, this consulting, and there's analytics and different ways of working with MBA. Like, so do you get to like do a breadth first search into different fields, and like, do you get a chance to explore how does that work?
yeah, MBA is custom built for exploring career paths, I would say.
Okay.
The most obvious way to experiment would be an internship. If there's a field that you've been wanting to try out for a while,
Yeah.
get an internship there, see if it works out. If it works out, get a full-time, all good.
Yeah.
Another way of doing it would be in-semester internships, which is a little less formal when it comes to its recruitment path. So these are some internships you do alongside your coursework. So for example, if I want to try out product management, after my consulting stint during the summer, I would probably reach out to companies for an in-semester product management stint, and that would really allow me to experience what product management looks like at, let's say, startups or established firms. And thirdly, you also have a broad network around you. A lot of our cohort is very diverse in terms of the kind of people, career paths it's comprised of. So you can also speak to these people to really get a sense of what their jobs entailed before they came to Wharton. So at Wharton, you have a lot of these PEVC folks. You can speak to them to understand what their job was, what they had to do on a daily basis. And Wharton also has its own funds, which you can work in order to get that experience of VCP, etc.
Oh, got it.
So this is another avenue through which you can experiment with the career paths that you've been considering.
Got it. Yeah, man. Thank you so much, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
of course. Dude.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a while since I've spoken to you.
Yeah.
Good to see you're holding up well. Thank you so much for having me on the call.
Sure, man. Thank you so much. Just stop there.